Hey, everybody. Welcome to Revenue Marketing Raw. I'm Jeff.
I'm Debbie.
And this week's edition, sales still thinks you're useless. They're not wrong. Deb, why is that 20 years later? Why does sales still think marketing's useless?
It's the most amazing thing. And I feel like we're going to start every episode of Revenue Marketing Raw with the idea that who thought we'd be sitting here in 2025 and still talking about topics that were relevant back in 2004? I guess it's the dawn of time. You know, sales and marketing has always had an adversarial, first of all, if they even had a relationship. And then when they did start having relationships, it was an adversarial relationship. But it's always been such a mystery to me, and I think part of the reason it is that my background is sales. I was in sales. I ran sales organizations for a long time, and so when I migrated over just to full-time being in the marketing world, it just made sense to bring everything that I'd learned in sales over into marketing. But I've really had to be a little bit more patient with my brethren to understand if you've never had any cycles in sales, it's just very, very difficult to understand, what their world is all about. And it's really interesting, Jeff, that adversarial relationship. And again, it's good actually if you have an adversarial relationship, because at least you guys are fighting about trying to do something versus those relationships where they don't even, talk to one another. But I just think that this sales and marketing relationship really has a lot to do with just people being really uninformed and not understanding the power of when you can connect sales and marketing together as a team, just how powerful that is. I was talking to somebody recently and we were talking about RevOps. And we were saying how, the best RevOps teams are when you've got marketing operations, sales operations, and customer service operations all together. That gives you that one look at the customer. And it really does get everybody on the same page. But, we live in a world where marketing's a fiefdom, sales is a fiefdom, customer success is a fiefdom. Everybody runs their little empires, the way they want to. And there's just not a whole lot of momentum there to really get in alignment, to get on the same page. And
I feel like,
go ahead.
I was going to say, we've said this before. We feel like therapists. We have couches in our office for all of our brethren. They feel so misunderstood, and they can't seem to get along with their sales counterparts, and they're constantly searching for that respect. It really is interesting because sales isn't held accountable for revenue. They are, in the sense that obviously if salespeople don't hit their quota, then they lose their job. Same thing for sales leadership. But as a percentage of budget, the sales doesn't really change year over year like marketing does, right? So the first thing that gets cut is the marketing budget, but the sales budget doesn't get cut. And people are still focused on attribution as to who gets credit versus focused on winning. Why isn't it focused on how sales and marketing bring in revenue together, whether it's net new or follow on? So I think part of the problem of alignment is lack of shared goals and objectives that the company can achieve.
But even before that is this whole credibility issue. If the CRO in your organization does not believe that marketing is instrumental in helping to drive revenue, there is no power on earth that is going to get that sales and marketing team aligned. And lip service is not enough. And you and I have been in many organizations where marketing is trying to create this relationship, and sales is just like, well, yeah, we'll work with you, but then they really don't. So it begins with the shared belief that the role that marketing plays in driving revenue is a real important element to the pipeline and to closed business. Then once you have that belief, once marketing is part of that team, then having those shared goals. I remember Jeff and, guys, Jeff and I go back a long, long way. I bought Eloqua in 2004. Jeff you were heading up professional services at Eloqua, right, Jeff?
Yes.
Yeah. I remember going to the sales organization and telling them that we're going to help them drive revenue, and them looking at me like I had just grown a second head. But we did, right? And I also had credibility because I had also come from sales. And so I knew how to talk sales. And I think that made a big difference. So the rift has to do with a lot of crappy, old thinking, right? And if you've got to have a sales organization, and you've got to have a sales leader that really has a vision and an understanding for the role that marketing can play. I've seen so often where marketing is trying to drive this, and it just it's just so hard. I see better success when a new CRO is hired and they come in with an experienced set of working with marketing and seeing marketing as a critical role in pipeline and in revenue. That's where I see the most success.
It does make a tremendous difference when the CRO or VP of sales is on board. But unfortunately, that's not the case in a lot of companies. So outside of telling the CMO or VP to go find another company, what would you tell them? You know, how do you build a relationship with someone that inherently doesn't understand or doesn't respect?
You know, it's got to be proof. And we know that proof doesn't happen overnight at scale, right? It happens in pockets. It happens when you think about a campaign, or you think about, let's just say there's one, instead of thinking about a campaign, think about, you know, the company could really, really do well this year if we can increase our enrollments by, let's say, 10%, right? So if we can increase enrollment by 10%, then this will have a big impact on the earnings of the organization. And then think about a plan from that direction, right? And then take a look at that customer journey, understand where and how marketing interacts, what is the role of marketing, what is the role of sales, and then create like a small pilot group, if you will, maybe one or two salespeople or BDRs that you might work with to create that proof. Because we know that if marketing comes to sales and says that we can do this, they may or may not listen. But if you have a salesperson who actually gets leads and actually closes business from something that marketing gave them, that is the spark that ignites everything. Because these guys and these gals in sales, they're under the clock in big pressure situations, you know, 24/7. So I think that's where it starts. What do you think, Jeff?
It very much is about that relationship. And you think about, how do you build a relationship with anybody, your significant other, your friends, business colleagues? It's building trust over a period of time. It's a series of small things to lead to the bigger things. So I think just showing up, getting out of the office and going out in the field, going on sales calls, seeing how your programs and your campaigns are truly being experienced. You know, spend a day in the life of a salesperson, go out on the road and really understand and see it through their eyes. That allows you to start to adapt your way of thinking. And it's not just about generating leads, right? It's, yes, we all need leads, of course, but really it's about generating actionable pipeline. And then
all the way through.
You know, that's the problem with the whole MQL thing. It's like, oh, I did my job. I threw the thing over the wall, so I'm done. No, your job's never done.
No,
right?
it doesn't help at all.
Right. So you got to reframe. That's not that you shouldn't measure lead volume, but you got to reorient to think about, how are we consistently generating not just pipeline for net new, but for existing customer retention, cross-sell, upsell. And that's really where it has to redirect. And that's been one of the biggest problems with attribution. Marketing's gotten so desperate to prove themselves that they're falling all over themselves with different kinds of attribution models just to concretely prove that they actually did what they were supposed to do.
That's absolutely true.
It's really so unrealistic anyway, just in today's buying environment. It's almost impossible to come up with a statistically valid source. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be measuring your marketing mix and channels and performance, but focus on the company goals. Are we hitting our top line revenue growth?
Yep. I was working with a very, she was really a revenue marketing VP. That was just her MO. She was all about the revenue, all about the credibility. And I was working with her team, and it was a new team that she had. And we were looking at key performance indicators. And I told her, I said, Liz, I said, here's a really great key performance indicator for you that you need to have all of your marketing team track. And that is time in front of sales, or time with sales. And the second one was time in front of customer. So imagine if you had those two key metrics in your organization, so that every marketing person on your team had to spend X amount of time listening to sales calls, going on sales calls, listening to the world of the sales organization, and also time in front of customers. That's not a 30-second hello, how are you at a trade show booth, right? How much better informed would that marketing team be in two things: understanding the customer, and so they can have that conversation with sales, but also understanding the world of sales. I often tell marketers, and gosh, I wish I had a copy of my book, Rise of the Revenue Marketer. I created the most basic model back then, and it was all about how do we help the marketing team understand the world of sales. And Jeff, you and I have talked about doing this, so we just need to do it and get it over. We have talked about doing a white paper or a book or some kind of training. It's like Sales 101 for marketing. What does marketing need to understand about the world of sales? Why don't we create something like that? You know what? We should have a session where we kind of pre-draft it out, and then we talk about that, because marketing, huh?
We could do that next week.
We should absolutely do that next week. So as a marketer, what is it that you need to understand, and what is it you need to understand about the world of sales, and how does that help you? So a few metrics. What if all of your marketing had a certification in I Speak Sales? What if all of your marketing team had a metric that said time spent with sales, listening to sales calls, pre-recorded or not? It doesn't matter. And then also time in front of the customer. Those three things, what kind of difference would it make in marketing understanding sales, and then better able to communicate and work with sales and explain the power of what they're bringing to the table? I mean, how simple is that?
It's very simple. And it's how many times do we ask that question of our clients? And so many times we get crickets from the marketing team, because they're not going out. Now, sure, they'll see customers at trade shows or conferences.
Not the same thing. It helps, but
yeah. It's we're talking about actually going out on sales calls and spending a day in the life, and that is such a critical, important thing. And look, in any relationship, right? If you truly want to build a bridge, you need to spend time understanding the other person's point of view. And it's too sanctimonious to say well, sales should come over and see our point of view. Well,
yeah,
maybe they should, but the reality is they're not. So if you want to then build that healthy relationship, you got to take that proactive measure.
Marketing has got to be the bigger person in this. Absolutely, totally.
But I do want to get back to we talked about this a few minutes back about the shared objectives and shared goals, because even when you have a healthy relationship, if you're not measuring the same things, it is so easy to quickly get out of alignment. We've seen this so many times. So you could be in that executive leadership meeting, and then everyone's aligned with what the goals are, but then the head of sales leaves and is chasing a revenue number, and the CMO leaves and they're chasing a lead number, and that's not the same thing.
Yeah. So Jeff, I remember again back in 2004, because again I had come from sales. I'd either been in sales or had sales and marketing as a leader, and then I was in a role where I was just marketing. And we bought Eloqua in 2004, and I told my marketing team that 50% of their variable comp was going to be tied to the number of accepted leads that marketing was giving to sales, meaning you can't just send the lead over. The sales team had to say, yes, this is a great lead and I'm going to follow up on it. Now, I lived in Atlanta and you could hear my team screaming all the way to Seattle. No joke. But did it change behavior? Yes. I began to see sales and marketing talking to one another. So the lead would go over, and then marketing would follow up with the salesperson. How's that lead going? They had this other activity. What are you doing with this? What are you doing with that? And it just made a world of difference, because finally marketing was understanding what it takes to really close a piece of business. And sales was getting to understand, wow, that they have all of this information that they can be passing to me about what's happening with this lead. And it again, at first it was very, very rocky, but then it became to be they were all working as one team. So you're right, shared goals and objectives are incredibly important. We've walked into organizations where the CMO would tell us, we're giving them all these leads and they're not following up on anything. I vividly remember this. This was a large company. We're in New York City. And I said, okay, I get it. Later that day, I met with the VP of sales and we're talking, and I asked him about it. I said, marketing's working really hard, passing all these leads over, and there's very little follow through. And he looks at me and he says, well, he didn't say honey, but because he wasn't from the South, but he gave me that look, honey. And he told me, he said, look, my guys make as much money to get the next contract with a current client as they do working with a net new customer. And they've got plenty of follow through business and contracts that they're working on. So I don't know why marketing thinks they have to give us net new, where my team's bread and butter is on, the next contract with the current customer. So just a total misunderstanding between, a global CMO and a global CRO.
It happens all the time. And then we had a credit union, a customer that we work with for a long time, and they had just spent a ton of time investing in going digital, because they had such a legacy branch operations, and they had just signed up for loan origination online. And we're 3 months into the project, and they're just not seeing really a pickup in any digital loan applications. Come to find out, the sales organization was still compensating and bonusing the sales team to send people into the branches. So they spent all this money to put in digital infrastructure, but then it just, you had a different direction. And so that, more than almost any other thing, can create some misalignment issue when those objectives are not the same. So really, it's really important to get that clarity.
Yeah, I agree.
Make sure that you're on the same page. So what do we cover today? Share the objectives, sales training for marketing, working on that relationship. And
some new KPIs, time with sales.
Yep. And then just spend a day in the life of the salesperson. So, but we've seen it though, when sales and marketing are working together, it's a beautiful thing. And
it's beautiful.
They both bring meaningful contributions to the table. And marketing has a job to do, and so does sales, right? So when they're working together, then the world's their oyster.
I distinctly remember, Jeff, we were working with a new company. This was some years ago. And I'm talking to the head of marketing, and we're talking about revenue and revenue marketing. And something came up, and she said, oh no, Debbie, sales and marketing is the revenue team in our organization. And I remember I just got chills thinking that's exactly the way it should be. There should be one team, the revenue team, and then everybody plays a role, an important role.
Amen. Yeah. Preach it, Dr. Deb.
Preach it, baby. Preach it.
Preach it. All right. So we're going to see you all next week. And we're going to go over sales training for marketing. Why not?
I think it's a great idea. All right. We'll see you then, Absolutely. Jeff. Bye, everybody.
All right. Come on.
I think we're still live.